Ukraine on air. We welcome you from the heart of the Europe. 35 days passed since the full-fledged invasion of Russian Federation of Ukraine. We are here in the studio delivering you the latest news about the Russian invasion. And Nick Starkov here, good afternoon. And we proceed to the first news, and this is traditionally our data from the battlefield. You see on screen now the numbers of Russian Federation's losses in Ukraine. It's updated regularly, and the calculations themselves are quite difficult. You see now that over 17,300, this is the death range of the Russian forces in Ukraine. Also, you see different types of vehicles and technical lost in Ukraine. So there is tanks, armored vehicles, artillery systems, multiple rocket launchers. In our broadcast yesterday, we've tried to deliver you more detailed analysis of how this calculation is being made. And I remind you, if you're interested, I'll send you there to our yesterday's broadcast. The data themselves, as of now, is a summary provided by the General Staff of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. One way or another, the losses of Russian troops for the current month of hostilities in Ukraine are already massive, and they are more than they already the losses they suffered during the war in Afghanistan, in Chechnya, and just see how disastrous this is going on right now in Ukraine, when they recklessly trying to attack peaceful cities from the sky, just like in Mariupol. Today, occupants shelled the building that was marked with the Red Cross marking. So 35 days passed, 35 days of Ukrainian defense. All this time, Russian forces were destroying infrastructure, first of all, civilian infrastructure, the homes of civilians. Tonight, missiles hit a number of cities again. According to preliminary information, the air defense system worked properly, and there is no official information yet about losses, but we've collected everything we could in our next story. Let's watch.
Russian troops shelled Lysychansk in the Luhansk region with heavy weapons in the morning. Multi-story buildings in one of the districts were heavily destroyed. There is a lot of debris. Rescuers are trying to get the survivors out as quickly as possible. Information on the number of casualties is still being clarified. Severodonetsk, Popasna, Rubizhne and Kreminna also came under large-scale shelling at night. Air and missile strikes were launched there. The day before, the enemy damaged the State Emergency Services laboratory in Rubizhne, and its equipment was burnt out. In the morning, occupiers hit one of the districts in temporarily uncontrolled Donetsk. Several upper floors of the residential building got damaged. Apartments get set on fire. According to preliminary reports, one person was killed and 4 were wounded. During the night there were explosions in the Khmelnytsky region and a fire broke out. No details are available yet. Russian troops launched a missile attack on an airfield in Starokonstantinov. They destroyed the fuel and lubricant storage.
I urge you not to voice information that our military should be the first to voice. Also, no need to post photos or videos of locations where shelling took place, when shells hit, exact addresses, missiles flying, or any other information not verified by the state.
The enemy continues to conduct unlawful acts against civilians in Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. In Melitopol, the invaders have organized checkpoints on the outskirts of the city and strengthened the pass regime. They also detain pro-Ukrainian activists and rob homes of locals. People are hiding in basements.
That's the way people are living now. It's very scary.
The consequences of yesterday's shelling continue to be eliminated in Mykolaiv today. The day before, the regional state administration was destroyed in a missile strike there. During the debris clean-up, 12 people were found dead. There were also 33 wounded. 18 employees were rescued.
A girl on my floor died. What can I say? I hugged her and 2 minutes passed. Missed her.
The consequences of the Russian attacks are also still being eliminated in Nizhyn. Yesterday afternoon, the enemy shelled a private sector of the city. According to the United Nations, at least 1,179 civilians have been killed and 1,860 injured over the months of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine. Nearly 4 million Ukrainians have become refugees and 6.5 million have become internally displaced persons. Reported by Roman Smolar, Natalia Voloshina, UATV.
And we're back to studio. Here we are again with our first guest. Now welcome here the Doctor of Anthropology, Senior Fellow of National Institute for Strategic Studies in Foreign Policy Department, Valery Kravchenko. My greetings to you.
Good day.
Welcome. The first news of current days of the yesterday and today is the negotiation process that is taking place right now offline and online in Istanbul. Yesterday we've got a couple messages from the field. First of all, these were messages from the Russian side, messages from Ukrainian side. We even heard a word de-escalation voiced by the representative of the Russian negotiation side, Medinsky. So my first question to you is just quite obvious. What is this signals to, and what will be the next stage right now?
Let me say that the signals that they put it there, you showed in this numerous crimes in your video fragment you put it before. I could say that the diplomacy is just smoke on the water in that meaning, because war is going on and Russia's military crimes in Ukraine is also going on. And I saw my native Donetsk, by the way. So probably the Russians understood that they're having this very hard crimes in Kharkiv, in Mariupol, and they decided to do something with Donetsk. So Donetsk, of course, they will say that it's Ukrainian armed forces were shelling the city. So obviously what they're doing is on the ground it's more essential than what is told in the high cabinets elsewhere in Moscow or in Istanbul, in Turkey, as it was yesterday. Unfortunately, I don't see the reasoning for de-escalation from the side of Russia. They still have not fulfilled all they promised to all the goals of that in-lapse special operations they are organizing. And I just want to remind you that they naming it the special operations not in Ukraine but in Donbass. So the primary goal is Donbass and Donetsk, Lugansk Oblast areas, and as they wanted to make this so-called DPR and LPR republics in all the borders to restore territorial integrity, as they're talking about this. Obviously, it's understandable that they're not fulfilled these goals, so they need a time to make more crimes, more aggression towards Ukrainian people elsewhere, and the primary direction is eastern direction for them now, as well as south is also essential, and probably they will try to make a second wave around Kharkiv also. I believed that Kharkiv was a primary goal because before that campaign they dreamed about the Soviet Ukraine with the capital in Kharkiv, and as soon as they have the losses, big amount of soldiers was killed. Russian soldiers were killed in Kharkiv direction. So they probably will try to do something with that, and provoking will continue to provoke some incidents, some military clashes around the Kiev also, because it's second theater of military actions they are just having in mind, concentrating on the first one, and first is as I said, is the eastern Ukraine.
Your opinion is quite clear, and we already heard some messages from the White House, from the U.S. stating basically that what's happening right now on the negotiation process from the side of Russia is just dragging time. Some of opinions stating that they are dragging time. At the same time, what should Ukrainian do? What should Ukrainian side do in this situation? This is also quite clear, because I propose you to listen to the official position. What Vladimir Zelenskyy, President of Ukraine, this is an official position, an opinion in this issue. Also, after that, we will hear the commentary from the speaker of the negotiation team from Ukraine, advisor to the head of the presidential office, Mikhailo Podolyak. He is now probably in this process, and on what Ukraine proposes in this situation. Let's hear right now.
We can call the signals we hear from the negotiating table positive, but these signals do not mask the bursting of Russian shells. Of course, we see all the risks. Of course, we see no reason to trust the words of certain representatives of a state that continues to fight to destroy us. Ukrainians are not naive people. Ukrainians have already learned both in these 34 days of invasion and in the past 8 years of war in the Donbass that only concrete results can be trusted. The enemy is still on our territory. The shelling of our cities continues. Mariupol is blockaded. Rocket and air strikes do not stop. This is reality. These are facts. Therefore, the armed forces of Ukraine, our intelligence, all those who have joined the defense of the state are the only guarantee of our survival today. As a people, as a state, a guarantee that really works.
And now the next speaker, Mikhailo Podolyak.
In the course of these 4 weeks, practically we are alone with the concrete, aggressive actions of the Russian Federation. We are inside a war. Inside this war we have a lot of work to do. One of those volume of work is called a diplomatic settlement, the negotiation process that we are engaged in. In the course of this negotiation process, Ukraine, despite the initial ultimatums, demands of the Russian Federation, has arrived at a formula that guarantees us the following: effective security guarantees. What this is? This is not the theory but practice, when we can get legally verified multilateral guarantees from countries that will include the best armies in the world, in particular the United States, Turkey, Great Britain, Germany, France, and a number of other countries, which will have legal relations with us, within the framework of which there will be guarantees in case of such a crisis, conflict, I would even say war. They will implement these guarantees. That is, we will have to receive weapons, immediate military advices. So we must not find ourselves in the situation when we found ourselves on February 24th. And the second component, we have formulated our proposals on the basis of the objective reality, which we see on the battlefield. Ukraine is under attack everywhere. Our cities are being bombed. And accordingly, based on the picture, of course, our armed forces are ready to compensate all of this in terms of retaliatory strikes. But we proceed from the fact that Ukraine cannot be destroyed.
So now we are back in studio with our guest, Mr. Valery, and my next question to you is based on what we've just heard. These are, of course, official positions. But we also know that Volodymyr Zelenskyy clearly stated, we don't believe just words. We need to believe facts and actions made by Russian Federation. Also, Mr. Podolyak has delivered very clear and detailed pattern of how Ukraine tries to establish the new security guarantee pattern for not just Ukraine, but to create a new idea of it, a big idea of a security framework in Europe. So what's your comment on this? And the question is, just to put it shorter, the question is, when we've now between the peace and justice, and how to save Ukrainian lives. The question is how to save Ukrainian lives, the Ukrainian state. Where should we be?
It depends. It depends. You're saying you save Ukrainian lives, and then you're saying is able to save the Ukrainian state. You have to understand that we could make some kind of peaceful negotiations and to save the lives. But in that case, probably we could lose our statehood. And I'm too far from thinking that it's an easy decision to speak to Russians, because the primary goal of Russia is the elimination of Ukrainian statehood. I mean, the free Ukraine, the liberty of Ukraine, so the democratic of Ukraine. But of course, okay, they are just dreaming about the Soviet Ukraine with the Russian control Ukraine, but it will not be Ukraine. So we are just having a war for our values, for our statehood, and it's very difficult to make a peaceful negotiations with the side which are much bigger than you, with have a much resources than you have, and the goal of this another part is to kill you, to eradicate the Ukraine, the name of Ukraine from the map. So, but still, it's track. We're playing this game. We are talking about some prohibited issues for Russia, just reminding about the Crimea, for example, and so on and so on. I'm not telling that it's senseless, but the sense of it is really low, as from my point of view. And regarding the frameworks are important. We have to speak that it's not just a local conflict, regional conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's a conflict between civilizations, between the West, the collective West, and we are just on the border of that West, and having this war not only for our territories, but for other, let's say, civilized Western countries. And it's clash between, it's a split between democratic world, the world which is ruling on the power of rule of the power of laws, with a world which is ruled by authoritarian regimes. And we have to speak that another conflict, latent conflict, is in the shadow of our conflict.
Excuse me for interrupting you.
Between the United States and China.
Your position is clear, but still, talking about the security guarantees, and we now see on the one leverage the security guarantees that this is for me, to my mind, this is a beautiful idea to bring something instead of the current situation, the one we have just sanctions. Among the tools, we have just some economic pressure that is very effective, but at the same time poses a question about its effectiveness when the side subject to sanctions tries to bypass them. At the same time, we are trying to create the new situation, the new security framework, and the countries among them, we've heard the Podolyak, he mentioned the main armies of the world. So Russia possesses nuclear power, and these countries also possess nuclear power. So does it, the question is just simple, does this situation which Ukraine is trying to create right now, the security framework, really can replace the framework that used to be before?
We're living in the new reality, of course, you're right. So it's not a post-bipolar world, it's something else. But it's very easy to understand where we are and why we are talking about this, honestly, about this new, let's say, alliance, because we just knocked the door of North Atlantic Treaty Alliance for many years, and it was finally closed for us, unfortunately. Still, I believe that it's the most efficient military bloc, military alliance in the world, but not for us, as for now. And Russia, what just doing now, Russia is having this blackmail in the world with the nuclear nukes, and it could, and I could say, even with the most percentage that probably Russia will use this nuclear power somewhere, then they will make the peace with Ukraine finally. So they're just, we are talking about the mad dictator. We are talking about the mad country. And in that conditions, we are talking still with these peaceful negotiations with these people in Turkey. I don't believe in any military guarantees from the Russia. I want to hear the proposals from the United States, first of all, because Russia playing this war here in Ukraine, not against Ukraine. They are thinking that they are fighting against the United States. So it's a revisionism, it's a revanchism for losing in the Cold War. So of course, United States are far from thinking that they just want to be involved engaged into that conflict directly, because in that meaning it could be this mass nuclear strike finally organized, and Russia is ready. They're just saying that they're ready. I'm feeling that they're having the chantage and blackmailing on that words, but the fear and scaring of the politicians in the United States from that point of view is still big, and if not the United States, so we could speak about the United Kingdom, of course. United Kingdom
Thank you
has a
very much.
potential, and Poland also another country, non-nuclear country, but I believe that the mutual efforts of Ukraine and Poland, two big powers in the region, is good for bringing the peace to that area. But it's about silence.
Mr. Valeri, excuse me, I just want to say that your position is very understandable, and very briefly, because we've got not so much time, I just want to present the another meaning, another position, another opinion. Let's see what Mr. Fesenko, it's a Ukrainian political scientist, stated in our broadcast, in Ukrainian broadcast, and then just very briefly, your opinion, is it true or not?
Russia is playing a tactical game in the negotiations, a propaganda game as well as a negotiating game. I mean, negotiators tell us one thing and Russian officials tell us another. What Medinsky said, the reduction but not cessation, but reduction of military actions in the Kiev and Chernihiv directions. In reality, they have already been reduced, because Russia is unable to do anything in these directions. But at the same time, the fighting in Donbass intensified.
So you've just heard, and what's your stand on it?
I say it from the start, what exactly Fesenko said just. It's a game, of course it's a game, and I don't believe in diplomacy as an effective tool. And we have to understand that probably the Lavrov department and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is quite tricking in their role, and their role is just to shadow the main actions and that Russia is doing in the ground. So Russia will force the second wave of aggression in Ukraine in the same time when Russian diplomats will speak about peace and guarantees and something like that. It's just not effective for our country. I could say the only guarantee for our country and the only security guarantees of our country is the enforcing of our armed forces.
Thank you.
Weapon, by
Thank you very much, Mr. Valery.
So it's a main idea.
We've got some also technical issues. The voice sometimes is a bit lagging. So, Mr. Valery, again, thank you very much. Just our broadcast is limited. The discussion was very great and powerful. Thank you very much. Here we had Valery Kravchenko, that was a senior research fellow in the Foreign Policy Department of the National Institute for Strategic Studies. And now we proceed for another, for our materials from Ukraine. We've prepared many stories about the destroyings that destroyed cities, and there will be plenty of them in our today's coverage. Since the beginning of the Russian invasion, just think about this figure. 145 children were killed and another 222 were injured. But this figure doesn't include the number of children dead in one city, Mariupol. So now I want to show you the material prepared by my colleague that Ukrainian armed forces managed to retake the town called Trostianets in the Sumy region from the Russian invaders. Let's look to the saved civilians and how they greet Ukrainian forces.
This is how the town of Trostianets, which has been recently liberated from Russian invaders, looks now. It had been under a blockade of Russian troops for almost a month. Putin's army shelled the town using all kinds of weapons. Dozens of destroyed Russian army vehicles, including tanks and heavy artillery, were either abandoned behind by the retreating forces or destroyed. Residents say that the city was mercilessly bombed and residential buildings were destroyed.
Personally, I have not seen much. In the area beyond the railway station, many residential buildings were damaged. Personally, 3 missiles flew into my place.
Now Ukrainian soldiers are checking the occupiers' abandoned vans. The state emergency service personnel are removing boxes of ammunition from the streets. Residents say that during the day, the Russian soldiers shot at residential neighborhoods, and at night they went door to door and took food from people.
What happened here? Our entire town was occupied by, as we call them, orcs or Russians. In this square there were tanks. Beyond this building, after the bus station, there was artillery, and here were the militias of the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. In the evenings they came to us, to our houses and our basements, and stole our pickles, potatoes, lard and cucumbers.
Active fighting took place in Trostianets for about a month. As a result, the population is facing a humanitarian crisis.
As you can see, there were battles here over the past months. Projectiles were flying over and people were saying they were frightened. They were left without food and water. There was a horrible humanitarian situation. Now that there are no flyovers or shellings in the last 3 days, perhaps it is getting better. Local emergency services were able to arrive, and we will do everything in our power to help them. We will follow the situation and do our best to help the people.
So you've just seen what happens in the city retaken by Ukrainian forces, and now you will see another story prepared by my colleague Evgen Mikhin about another picture from that side when the Russian forces enter Ukrainian cities. About how the Russian army behaves in Ukraine. Look at the prepared story.
They kill women and children. They shoot at the cars with civilians with the white flag trying to leave the dangerous zone. They use Red Cross signs on their military vehicles, while the Red Cross does not allow to use their sign for humanitarian corridors. They torture people in the captured villages. They are mining residential territory when retreat, and they steal everything they find. They are the second army of the world, at least until 24th of February. Cowardly looters without education and even without appropriate food supplies. Russian army became famous for stealing toilets when they invaded civilized Georgia. That weird gadget impressed savages so much that they started to pull it out to take home. Money, high-tech, Russians always steal when they can. On this video, the soldier tries to confront the door and the door wins. They cannot capture Kyiv, so they capture a hen house. Interesting that even chickens didn't agree to surrender. The overall IQ level is obvious in this photo. They were sent for demilitarization, but first of all, these Russian looters demilitarized their own vehicles with the stolen potato. And this is another side of the Russian occupiers. While their dictator complains about cancelled Russian culture, his orcs destroy libraries and burn books different from the Kremlin propaganda. Among killed and tortured by Russian occupiers are musicians, teachers, civilians that just spoke Ukrainian. The nation of hate right now regroups its so-called army after an unsuccessful 2-3 days war. The horde of mentally challenged and morally dead savages is preparing for new attacks.
Now we are back to studio, and here is latest news from and about Ukraine regarding the Russian invasion. What we've just known from the United Kingdom. United Kingdom of Great Britain intends to increase military aid to Ukraine, as the country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson stated. He personally warns, talking about the negotiation process and the behavior of Russian Federation. Indeed, the leader of Great Britain warns on the possible Putin's behavior in the military campaign, citing the Defense Chief Staff for United Kingdom, Tony Radakin. Support for Ukraine is entering a new phase as it tries to retake territories seized by Russia. This means that Ukrainian partners in the West, they're still they're still unwavering in their position. No sign of lifting sanctions or military defense or humanitarian one. Just as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated, we're still on alert. And now I want to present you our next story about about the humanitarian efforts from Ivano-Frankivsk, western Ukrainian city. How Ivano-Frankivsk greets, how it makes all efforts to help other parts of Ukraine that face the war, particularly Kherson region. It's a southern region that is under constant heavy shelling. The ongoing hostilities on the borders of that region and occupation led to a humanitarian catastrophe. There is no food and medicine, but however, one of the local volunteers is trying to help at least a small number of settlements. He's delivering humanitarian aid, from where you'll now see in our next story.
Where did you come from?
I came from Novovorontsovka, Kherson region.
Sir, he is a volunteer, one of the few who managed to escape the occupied Kherson region. He says that his native village is on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. There is fighting going on there right now.
It's flying. Flying. A very difficult situation. A bunch of orcs, the occupied Novovorontsovka, remained as a buffer zone. It's hard with medicines, it's hard with food. And the Russians don't offer anything. They're sitting hungry themselves, specifically in the Novovorontsovka district, where they entered. They're taken away from people, and people do not get anything because we have no connection with Kherson.
Serhiy is trying to bring help to his fellow villagers at his own risk. He travels to western Ukraine to bring it. He mainly collects medicines since the pharmacies are empty. Even the activated charcoal is not available.
I mean, children get sick. There are no antibiotics. It's impossible to find them. Finding the appears is impossible. Here is everything that we have now transferred specifically to Novovorontsovka. There is something for the villages nearby. Maybe it will reach Alexandrivka. We sent over not a lot of things, a little bit, but now it seems to be getting better. Maybe we will get in some more.
Recently, Serhiy managed to send 3 buses full of food and medicines from Lviv to the villages in the Kherson region. A new batch is being collected in Ivano-Frankivsk at the moment. Both local authorities and entrepreneurs promise to help.
Food, sugar, butter, cereals, pasta, various household chemicals, paper, napkins, hygiene products, all the essentials.
Several carriers agreed to deliver humanitarian aid free of charge. Mikhailo regularly travels to the areas where there are active hostilities. Aren't you afraid of being fired upon?
What to be afraid of? You can also get under fire lying on the stove. It may fly you on your sleep.
First, drivers transport humanitarian cargo to the nearest safe place in the Dnipropetrovsk region, and then the volunteers, together with local residents, transfer it to the occupied territories. Part of the humanitarian aid has already arrived at one of the hospitals.
People don't have access to medicines, hygiene products. Your cargoes literally save human lives. In addition, part of the cargo was handed over the neighboring communities, also located in the occupied territories.
Now, the Ivano-Frankivsk region collects and sends hundreds of tons of humanitarian aid daily. These are clothes, food, medicines, hygiene products and baby food. Except for Kherson, they are also being sent to Chernihiv, Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Reported by Marina Stepanenko, Anastasia Lisova, UATV News.
And just intermediately, I'll deliver you some recent news and statements by world leaders. The Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, has alleged Moscow in imperialism. He stated that Russia doesn't want to be direct in their negotiations, and we all know that still Russian side doesn't call the ongoing hostilities in Ukraine a war. They still call it a so-called special military operation. And let's go for our next stories. I just asking my team about whether it's prepared or not, and it's still not. So let's go for some another news. So here are them. 1 second. The head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Peter Szijjártó, publicly outraged over the Twitter of the leader of opposition, Hungarian opposition, Peter Markiazája. He made a tweet in support of Ukraine. And this tweet stating that at some point he supported the protest action in the center of Budapest that held in support of Ukraine. People took the streets, and we all know the official position of some countries, and unfortunately Hungary is among them, one of those countries among whom we don't see enough voices in support of Ukraine. And the official statement made by Peter Szijjártó is one of these signals. So the opposition leader stated that at some point we should meet at the bank of Dunai River and exchange the opinions about the future of European Union and peaceful coexistence of our nations. The Peter Sijarto, the head of the foreign ministry, stated in response that such a position drags Hungary in the war with Russia. So I've just delivered you one of the examples of how the West, sometimes some Western countries, react on this. And thank you for your attention. Right now, my team says me that another story is now can be on screen right now. Let's see what happens what happens with the humanitarian situation in one of the war-torn cities, Mariupol. We just don't have enough information from the city itself, but we know what happens with the people who finally made to leave that city. We've talked with two families. Let's see the story.
That's all that's left. These gloves weren't taken off for 3 days. We traded the axe. Without it, we couldn't go out at all. When the gas was turned off, we had to chop wood. We didn't have an axe. We exchanged it from an old man. With his help, we cut down the bottom of the bucket, so it was like a stove. It's all to sharpen the tool.
Mariupol resident Maxim Komisarenko shows a simple set of tools that saved his family from starving to death. When the neighboring 5-story building was bombed, together with his wife, they went down to the basement of their house, where they equipped the shelter of their own. There were about 40 of them in total, Maxim says. Everyone shared food with each other, but there were problems with water. It had to be collected under bombing from a stream in a neighboring area. Before the evacuation, Maxim was able to get some water and brought a little to the Dnipro as a keepsake.
And on the 15th, when I left, it was my turn. And I had the small car and we loaded 70 liters into it. It had already been slammed, and as soon as we came up, about 11 or 12 hours, and just everyone was gathering, they gave a green corridor. The taste of Mariupol and this water was unloaded. No one needed water because everyone was leaving.
2 days, Maxim and Kristina Komisarenko were getting to the Dnipro through Berdansk and Zaporizhia. They took their friends with them. When they saw that it was relatively safe here, they decided to allow themselves a little pleasure.
And first of all, we took doner, and my husband told me, just take for me doner with everything, with all the buns. This was the most delicious one. For how many? For a long time.
It was possible to take a minimum of things with them. Alexei Belous, a friend of Kristina and Maxim, says that the only memorable thing he brought from Mariupol was his great-grandfather's premium watch.
Here is a view of the Ministry of Culture of the URSR. 1964 for Mykola Panteleimonovich Sokirko. This watch was presented to my grandfather. He was a cultural figure in Ukraine. It's like saying, well, you know, a family heirloom or something. I don't know. This is the only thing that connects me with some distant roots.
In Dnipro, the guys got acquainted with volunteers who help with the arrangement of IDPs. In more than a month, Svetlana Lyshinska and her team placed 600 people from different towns of Ukraine in a new place and provided everything necessary.
Various requests are coming. Someone comes without money at all, and this is a demand for free housing. Someone wants better conditions. They have finances, and then we are talking only about utility bills or rent, but basically the largest part is for free. Everything that is possible, food, duvet covers, pillows, linens, medicines, we provide them with everything that is possible. For the owners, you can make an appeal to the residents of the Dnipro. Everyone who has free apartments, houses, maybe you can rent a room. Please call, write, because now there is a very high demand for housing.
Still, 160,000 civilians stay in the occupied Mariupol, according to the city council, and they all need help and evacuation. Reported by Marina Stepanenko, Natalia Bilokudra, UATV News.
And again, we are back to our studio. Our next guest is being prepared. The connection, while we are trying to reach out him, the connection probably in the city where our next guest is now residing, probably very troubled. Just the same as in our place. And you now see on screen the video from Donetsk. We just prepared you a little story, couple frames about the recent shelling in Donetsk city. Just to remind you that Donetsk city is controlled by Russian-backed forces since 2014, and right now we do not know, and there are no exact information and confirmed or verified data about who definitely shelled the city. Remind you that the OSCE monitoring mission does withdrawn from the city just since the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine, when the Russian Federation launched its invasion on the 24th of February. Britain's Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab on Wednesday expressed skepticism over Russia's pledge to scale back some military operations in Ukraine. Following the latest round of peace talks between both sides, Russia announced that it would reduce military activity near Kyiv, the capital, as well as the northern city of Chernihiv. This is what actually the President of Ukraine also mentioned. Let's see what Deputy Prime Minister of the Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, stated.
Well, I don't think a lot. We judge the Russian military machine by its actions, not just its words. There's obviously some skepticism that it will regroup to attack again, rather than seriously engage in diplomacy or anything of that nature. Of course, the door to diplomacy will always be left ajar, but I don't think you can trust what is coming out of the mouth of Putin's war machine. We don't know a huge amount about the contextual detail to it, but it's very worrying, and we're looking to clarify the situation with our allies. We're trying to lead the way. If you look at the response to Ukraine, we've got sanctions, we've got the humanitarian response and relief, we've got the visas position. On top of that, the PM was very keen with the Foreign Secretary and myself that we support the International Criminal Court, which is looking at the allegations and the reports of war crimes in Ukraine. So the UK, and I went out to The Hague and we offered support. We've offered financial and technical support to the ICC prosecutor. On top of that, last Thursday, I hosted a meeting in The Hague. 38 countries joined, and we said on the basis of our package, what can we do together to make sure that there is no impunity for war crimes in Ukraine. The ICC prosecutor was there, and I think it's a good example of where, again, Britain is leading the way. Well, we've heard all sorts of reports of that. We know that the Russians have a long history and are very prevalent around the world in deploying mercenaries. They've done it hired hands, if you like, as you suggested. The Wagner Group is very well known, Libya in particular, but across Africa, and of course in the context of Ukraine. And it is a worrying sign. But it also probably shows you how dependent they've become on other fighters because of the weakness and the fragility of the forces, the professional forces, and their reliance on conscripts, which we're starting to see play out a bit in Ukraine. It's about what we can do now to preserve that evidence. And that also tells the commanders and Putin himself, everyone in between, that they're at serious risk of ending up in the dock of a court and behind bars if they engage in further war crimes or indeed for any other action that they've taken.
You've just heard the statement by the Deputy Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Dominic Raab. We are facing right now extremely hard technical issues. We are bringing our excuses for that. These technical issues are connected with the overall situation we face now in Ukraine. Basically, we have very bad internet connection. So back to the Prime Minister Dominic Raab. What he just said, that there is no way the the military support or humanitarian support of Western countries will be lifted even after the some intermediate result on the negotiation table is being will be reached. But still, Russian Federation committed a lot of crimes in Ukraine, and somebody has to pay for this. Not just somebody. Russian Federation has to be either pay for this or brought to some action by the International Court of Justice. And the United Kingdom is the side who is actively in facilitating of this process. While we are waiting for our next guest, I want to propose to see the statement by John Kirby. This is the Pentagon spokesman, United States Pentagon. Oh, we now have the guest. We actually reached him. That's the great news, and one of the greatest news for right now. We are back to our studio with our next guest. This is, let me please make some introduce about Andriy Veselovsky. This is our high guest, Ukrainian diplomat and ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary of Ukraine. He served as an ambassador to Republic of Egypt. My greetings to you, Mr. Andriy.
Hello, how are you?
We are all just fine. Nevertheless, even though we have the war here, but we are still we are standing good. And how are you?
It's okay. Let's go.
So my first question to you: we've just seen couple coverages from the battleground and from the West and the Western statements. So you, as a diplomat, you might know that recently Pentagon spokesman by Pentagon John Kirby and the Deputy Prime Minister of United Kingdom, they both commented on what is happening right now in Istanbul. So the negotiation process that is taking place right now, from some points, some Western positions state that this is just a dragging of time. The United States, they state that it's not. This dragging of time aims the military regrouping for Russian forces. What's your stand on what is happening right now? Does the process of negotiations in Istanbul, can it bring some peace to Ukraine?
Let me start from the very beginning. Yes, I've been one time a Ukrainian ambassador to Egypt as well as to other countries, and to my regret, Egypt didn't yet formulate firm support to Ukraine in this war, but let's our diplomats continue their work. As to former representative of Ukraine to the European Union, I'm proud to say that the European Union states and adjacent states firmly support Ukraine, and not only support, and even bring the Ukrainian agenda to the world. As to the yesterday's meeting, it was, I expect, the beginning of the negotiations, because the meeting was not a negotiation yet, simply because Ukraine presented their own positions, their own views on the further possible peace talks, but Russia did not. So this presentation made an impression on a certain Mr. Medinsky, but his reply was the following: I would bring it to Moscow, and we will see what would happen. So today's Russian media and some officials have already said that part of Ukrainian proposals are utterly unadmissible and fantastic, and they are out of discussion. As to the neutrality, they will think about that. So I would agree rather with Mr. Kirby and other well-informed officials in the Euro-Atlantic area that the process, the war continues. The position of Ukraine in this war should be as firm as it was, and there is no ground to think about quick change of Russia's position because of a simple fact that during this night a lot of Ukrainian cities were shelled by Russian rockets indiscriminately, and a lot of peaceful citizens died.
Thank you very much. We've also heard what the representative, the spokesman of Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul, Mikhailo Podolyak, serves as an advisor to the office of the president. He stated, he described the Ukrainian proposition. He said that we are bringing a new judicial idea of how other states can guarantee Ukraine's security. My question is, how strong is this idea, and whether we know that right now the whole security framework in the world is just changing right now here in Ukraine, and then the questions are always the same: whether it work or not, whether we can believe Russian statements or not. But at the same time, the new mechanism, it still has to prove itself. And from your perspective, can this idea be realistic and make a new leverage on Russia, on pressure it from any further invasion and attempts to invade Ukraine?
I like your words that the new world order is being formed nowadays. Unfortunately, this new order tells us only the bad news, and I mean that the only realistic assurance is the military force. So without military force, Ukraine felt itself vulnerable, and that is why Russia started the war. Russia didn't start this war in NATO states because they are united by the North Atlantic Agreement, which means that the attack on one of the participants is the attack on all, and these all should take some actions against the aggressor. So the proposal worded by Mr. Podolyak doesn't bring nothing new nor specific, because there is no firm, say, mortal obligation of the participating parties to launch the war against the aggressor. They have right to do that, but it doesn't mean that they would do that. So the only existing cases of the real strong assurances or guarantees are the treaties like between the United States and Japan, or United States and Taiwan. There is some automaticity of the support and mutual defense. even in the NATO Article 5, there is no such an automaticity. I would rather say that there is no signals yet that Western countries are ready to give this automaticity of defense to Ukraine. Let us wait and see. And the peculiar moment is the possibility to include Russia in the guarantor's company. The guarantor aggressor is something new in the world diplomacy.
Thank you very much for this answer. The last my question to you, and I just asking to be very briefly in the answer. It's very short. Does the battleground, the military, still decides what will happen after the war, or now we should wait for negotiation results?
No, we shouldn't wait for the negotiation results. We should continue our defense, and we should ask again and again the Euro-Atlantic states to give us more good modern equipment, because we know how to use it with success.
Thank you very much for being here with us, Mr. Andriy Veselovsky. Ukrainian diplomat, ambassador extraordinary potentially of Ukraine. Again, thank you very much. You've just heard the positions of our experts, of people who once served as officials and diplomats and envoys to countries. Today we had two discussions, but not three. And we had plenty of technical issues. Now I just want to say thank to all the audience who are still with us here despite all the problems of our broadcast. This was the UA English broadcast from the heart of the Europe, from the middle of the war in Ukraine. And thank you for your support, for being with us. Good evening, and again, see you tomorrow.